This week it seemed appropriate to talk about ideas that can supplement or complement the learning that we're doing at home at the moment, because obviously with schools in lockdown, it's gone back to a lot of home learning. So I'm going to reiterate something I've said before, that it's important not to call this distance learning, because it's not about being distant, it's not remote learning. We're not trying to make it remote, we want to actually make it as engaging as possible. So I'm trying to sort of use the word online learning or home learning to make it more immediate. So one of the things I'm thinking of is the idea of having something that goes alongside whatever's being done at school. Whatever's being done at school is being done either through worksheets or online. And that means that there are times when the children are getting a little bit tired of it and they may want to switch off. Also, if you've got a child with maybe a learning need, then they might start to get agitated and just literally really sort of, it all becomes too much, and then you start getting a bit of a, I don't want to, you need to do this, and all that sort of stuff, which doesn't help the parents at home, it doesn't help the child's learning. So there's a few things. Firstly, I think it could be really useful, and I know from talking to a lot of parents I've discussed this with, it is really useful to have a sort of like a disc or something on the fridge or somewhere very visible that indicates whether you are at home or at school. And I think that's really important. So we as as parents, it's about looking, judging the child's mood, seeing that they're beginning to get a bit too fractious, and maybe switching it to home time, so that when it's on school, they're more engaged, it's easier to remain engaged, but then when it switches back to home, they know they can get on with their own things. If possible, and it is an if possible, because obviously for some people it isn't possible, to have a separate space where they're doing their work, so that there is a distinction between home and school, can be really helpful. So what I'm thinking is about having an ongoing project that really is based on child-centred learning, pupil-specific learning. So we are working from the personalised learning interests of the child. So the idea is to have a project going that actually can sort of overlap with all different curriculum areas. So there's a lot of learning going on, but it's doing it in a way that keeps the child engaged, the child's interested, and the child will want, hopefully, to do this. And it's worked very well for quite a few children. So one of the ideas behind it are the books by Christopher Lloyd, the What on Earth series. I'll just grab a couple to show you. These are the wall books. They're really big. You can get these. This one's on nature. You have them on absolutely everything. And what they do is the nature ones will look at, there's like timelines, so you can see what's happening at the same time in all different places, and it will have land, sea and sky. So what's happening on Earth, what's happening in the sky, what's happening in the sea at the same time. These books are great. They really would work well alongside the current Attenborough, the new Attenborough Planet series on television. But you also have mini ones, so you've got the one on science and engineering I've got here, there's one on sport, there's one on music. This is the first one, and it's the sort of absolutely everything, and it's brilliant, because they're small, but they come with a sort of magnifying thing, so you can see things a bit bigger. But they show you what was happening in space, on Earth, on the sky, the sea, at the same time, and across different disciplines. So you can see, well, at the same time as these things were ruling the Earth, these things were ruling the sky. And you can see where you get times where there's a lot more activity. These are really good reference books. I can't sort of prompt them highly enough. Promote them highly enough. There's Shakespeare. There's all sorts. They're good starting points. And Christopher Lloyd, he's spoken at a school I was teaching at. Done workshops. And I've been to his workshops at festivals of education and things like that. And it started with his child being homeschooled, and he was working from home. He wasn't working trying to do it as distinct subjects, and he decided to look at what his own daughter was interested in, and that was penguins. And it grew from there, and he realised that you could encompass so much more than just what is a penguin, as it were. You could look at family groups, you could have stories and so on. So the idea is to have a project that starts from a child's interest. So there's a child I know who's really interested in Pokemon, for example. So the idea would be that, for example, they can do top trumps type cards for the different characters. They can make up their own new characters. In doing the top trump cards, they're looking more deeply into characteristics. They've got to think about what aspects would matter. So you could do it on Tudors, you could do it on a particular point in history, whatever you're interested in. You could do it on vehicles, whatever your area of interest is you could take a top trumps idea, and then you'd be looking at characteristics you want to promote, giving them a value. So you then have all the maths of, well, how wide a range do you want? You can then look at, well, if you had this person's strength against this person's compassion and you multiplied them together, what would you get? So you could do various number things based on the top trumps cards. You would get the art element of drawing your characters or your vehicles or whatever it happens to be, your sports, whatever the area of interest is. And it just takes it further. So that's a good way of developing characters. It's something I've used when doing fantasy writing with children in school, where they are going to do a fantasy story, and before they get into the story they have to work out who their characters are going to be, and they do top trumps cards for their characters. But it can go beyond. It doesn't have to be on characters in a story. It could be on plants, any area of interest that is your child's specific area of interest. That's the key thing. In doing the project, you could include every type of writing. You could have letter writing as part of it. You could have information writing. You could have descriptive writing. You could have storytelling. You could have poems. You can have instructional writing. All of these could be incorporated into it. But you can also take it beyond there. If you decide to map out their world, then you're looking at map skills, but you're also going to look at geography. If you're talking about somebody, if you're working with somebody who's older, they can look at the geography and see the implications that has politically. So, for example, what happens if there's a mountain range? What about people living in different parts of the range, either side of the mountain? Does that affect things politically? Again, looking at the impact on the planet of various things. You could look at it historically as well as politically. If you, for example, I mean, my son likes D&D. So in that, you get storytelling, because in playing the games you do storytelling. There is basic number work with the dice. You can have the geography of the setting in which the D&D story is taking place. You've again got character building. You've got the history and the politics of that place. So it's about taking the different subject areas and putting them into an area that is interesting for your child. And you can take, as I say, it can then go into other curriculum areas. It's about that interest being the most important thing, that you start with where the child is. But you can incorporate art, you can incorporate drama, you can incorporate music. So the arts come into it too. You can also watch things on television or YouTube videos that will supplement what you're doing for your project. It means that if you're working from home, you have a child working from home, you both need the computer. Well, actually, there could be times where actually know that you're not online now, you're going to work on your project. You could have that home and school thing, could have homeschool project or whatever, homeschool Pokemon, homeschool D&D, whatever it is, homeschool our planet. Working, as I say, very much from the child's personal interests. If it's the child's interest, they're more likely to engage, they're more likely to be creative with it. You can then just drip feed aspects. And as teachers, you can have that. If you're a parent, you can do that at home there, but also as a teacher, you can set this as the other thing you're doing when you're not online. And it means that you all get time away from being online, because being online is tiring. Looking at a screen all day, it's good to be able to change your activity, mix it up a bit. And this way, the parent who then needs to use the laptop for their work can say, look, for the next hour, if you work on your project, I'm going to be using the laptop, and then we'll swap and you can do this. And you can plan your time more. And it's about making sure that the learning everything doesn't have to be national curriculum learning. There's learning in everything we do. If you do cooking with your child, there is chemistry happening. There is natural stuff happening with the ingredients, so stuff about science as in biology science, the science of nature. There's maths as in weighing things out, checking out the ingredients. And there's fun and creativity. There's instructional writing. If your child decides to do a recipe that ties in with their project, you could then make that recipe together. And they've got to think about the instructions, because they could write a recipe for you as the parent or the carer, and then you have to follow their recipe. So if the instructions aren't clear, it's not going to turn out as they're expecting. So you can do anything and bring in work. Playing games is incredibly good for learning. There's obvious games like Scrabble, and there's Junior Scrabble, so there are word games, and there's loads of them, bananagrams, I mean there's loads of word games. But there's also games, there are maths games, just simple board games involve maths. There's history games, chronology, things like that. There is so much out there, and playing a game with your child, they're getting that one-on-one attention which they're craving, but it's part of their education, and it's easy to forget, and it's important in fact for them to forget that this is part of learning. It's just part of life, but it's social interaction, learning to lose, and that's a really important part of life. Learning to accept when things don't go your way is a life lesson that we need. It builds resilience. So we can also do it with whatever the resources are that we have. There are games that can be played with just a pen and paper, and the internet is a great source of ideas for games. So all I'm saying is, don't worry if you're a parent or a teacher and you feel you can't just do constant online learning. It's just getting too much. There are other ways we can learn. They're just as important, and they can be adapted for the age and stage of your child, to the interests of the child, to the abilities of the child, so that we're always giving them a bit of a challenge, so they're being stretched, but built-in success, so that they're feeling that sense of achievement. With that balance, with their interests at heart, we can get through this incredibly difficult time and make it a time of fun where possible. Thank you.